Hey, welcome back to another episode. This Friday is reserved for a veteran highlight, and this veteran is doing amazing things. And I want to know if you knew this because I had no idea. Did you know that when a home is lost to tax foreclosure, millions in surplus funds, money that rightfully belongs to the former owner or their heirs, sits unclaimed in county coffers with estimates of over 95% of that money never making it back to the people who it rightfully belongs to? What if one determined Army veteran changed the reality one family at a time? Tamara Rucker is a St. Louis native and our guest today, and she's a U.S. Army veteran, a devoted mother who has turned her personal drive for justice into a thriving business. As the founder and CEO of Ruckwood Recovery, LLC, a 100% veteran-owned, family-run asset recovery firm based in St. Louis County, Missouri, she specializes in helping property owners, heirs, and families reclaim unclaimed funds from tax sales, surplus auctions, and state-held properties. As a licensed private investigator with expertise in asset recovery, compliance strategy, and risk management, Tamara has developed a proven process after witnessing firsthand how systemic issues leave everyday people without the resources they deserve. Inspired by a neighbor's desperate knock on her door after losing her home, she advocates for legislative reforms to promote fairness and accountability, ensuring that no one is overlooked in the fight for what is rightfully theirs. So, Tamara, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So, my first question for you is, can you tell us a little bit of background about you and about your military service?
So, I joined the service in 2008 as a military police officer, fresh out of basic. We were deploying. We were mobbing. We were deploying to Iraq, and I was a go for it. So we went and I decided I loved being with the contractors over there. I loved hanging with the contractors. I loved the fact that we were QRF, interns was part of it. So, after coming back, I decided to go to CO school, became a CO. So, what they call it is internment resettlement specialist.
Okay.
Did that and then decided to become a drill sergeant. And then after that, after so many deployments as different things, I actually became a government contractor. So my last deployment was as a government contractor for Triple Canopy.
Okay. Awesome. So with your military service and the multiple deployments that you've had, what are some of the leadership lessons that you've learned while you were serving?
Some of the leadership lessons were, take accountability. Whatever happens is on the leadership. If you haven't properly trained somebody or there's no proper oversight, obviously don't micromanage, but if you have not trained that person to do something properly and something goes wrong, it is on the leadership to take accountability for that.
No, that's a great point for accountability on the leadership part. Now, when you transitioned out of the Army, how did that work for you going from military to the contractor to whatever else followed on next?
Well, at that point, when I left the service, I was actually struggling with PTSD at the time, too. So, and I was in a rather rocky relationship with an individual who did not want me to stay in service. So I ended up giving that up and ETSing out to please the person I was with. And it caused a lot of regret. And actually worsened the PTSD just because the one thing I was proud of, I had given up. And then, there I was with all this experience, with all these memories, with all this experience and all these things I wanted to do, but couldn't, no path to do it.
Okay, so you had your military police background. Is that how you kind of ended up with Triple Canopy for your contract job? Can you
Yes.
kind of explain how that worked?
So I wanted to get into contracting so bad. And while I was still in service, they allowed me to go ahead and apply as a government contractor. I loved hanging out with and talking to the contractors that we did work with and hearing about their experiences and all the cool training they got to do. And they walked me through putting in my resume for Triple Canopy. I put in for a few large companies, but I ended up getting an offer from Triple Canopy to deploy to Israel. And I took it. And the crazy part, I was actually in a drill sergeant unit at the time. And they were like, yeah, go ahead. They said, yeah, go ahead. You'll still be, when you come back, you'll still be part of our unit. And I said, okay. I said, thank you.
Awesome. And so with that deployment experience, and then you came back, you had a rocky relationship that you said you were getting out of the military. What helped you find your way into the next path forward? Like your niche, like what is it that you thought your next calling was?
Well, I became a mother, and that's by far the most rewarding experience of my life was becoming a mother. But finding myself in a really difficult situation in a really abusive relationship and also wanting to do something for my community at the same time, being one of those people that can't just sit and do nothing. Now, granted, raising kids is extremely difficult, but I still wanted to work. I didn't want to be under the thumb of an abusive, you know what I mean? And then having no way out. And so I said, okay, well, I've got all this experience. I've got, an investigative background. I want to do something good. And so I decided to take those skills and put them to good use. And actually doing that and starting my company actually gave me the courage and the resources to actually leave that abusive situation. And I was actually able to grow Ruckwood Recovery to what it is today.
Awesome.
So asset recovery is just basically it's investigating and first you verify that there is a financial asset that has gone unclaimed or has been abandoned or lost, either lost, abandoned, or unclaimed. Whether it's tax foreclosure surplus, claimed property, bankruptcy court funds that actually just sit in court accounts waiting for the debtor or the creditor to get it, or mortgage overages. Now, my firm only handles tax foreclosure surplus and unclaimed property. And there's reasons behind that. But you verify that there's a financial asset and you help the person who it belongs to claim that asset because that claims process is hidden. That entire process can be hidden behind a bunch of red tape, or they just don't want it to be available to the public. It just kind of depends. But ultimately, an asset recovery specialist is somebody who assists an owner or heir or beneficiary in collecting a lost, abandoned, or unclaimed financial asset. So, when it comes to tax foreclosure surplus, I'll give you two examples as a matter of fact, because there are two separate things that we handled here. You've got tax foreclosure surplus. When a property owner does not pay their real estate taxes for 3 years, every single county in our country will take that house and sell it on the courthouse steps for those back taxes. And then it creates a bidding war with investors, big name investors who purchase a bunch of properties at these tax sales. They get them for pennies on the dollar. So say if somebody owed $5,000 in back taxes and it sold for $100,000, that $95,000 difference is the surplus itself. And that belongs to the owner of record at the time of the sale. And then you've got unclaimed property, which is every single other abandoned asset in any state that is lost or unclaimed. Every state has an unclaimed property division in some states say if you have a life insurance policy, right? And you passed away, but you didn't tell your children that it existed. The life insurance company is not going to reach out to your children and tell them that the policy exists. It was on the owner of the policy to inform their family of it. So if they find out and that premiums aren't getting paid and so on and so forth, and they find out that you passed away, they're not going to reach out. What they're going to do is hold on to it until the rightful owners come to claim it. But if it's not claimed in a certain period of time, in many states it's 3 years, then it goes to the unclaimed property division for safekeeping. So I'll say a case that I have right now is for a life insurance policy for unclaimed property. And that's actually just waiting for a check to arrive. They send it and yeah, and with tax foreclosure surplus. Um, you know, this particular case is a difficult one because it's in civil. So it went through the
Oh,
probate process, but another party came forward to claim it who has no entitlement. So it has to be battled out in court. And so we followed throughout that entire process until the claimant receives their entitlement. So I was already familiar with unclaimed property because I kept having, every time I checked my name in the unclaimed property website, I kept having unclaimed property from, I guess it was like a little business that I had started a long time ago, from an infomercial when I was like 18 in the middle of the night, like, ooh, this
okay.
seems like a good opportunity.
Yeah.
Oh, I kept having unclaimed property, so I already knew about that particular process. But for tax foreclosure surplus, my now ex-husband wanted to purchase tax sale properties because we had already had rental properties. And so he's like, oh, can you research this for me? I said, okay. So I got into it, but I actually became more interested in what happens after the tax sale. And I said, well, both of those things are in the same realm. And if I can help people claim this money and I found out that there was a process for it and a space for representation in that space. So I said, all right, well, I'm gonna create Ruckwood Recovery and see what happens.
Yeah. So that's amazing. I have never heard of unclaimed property before we had talked. And I think it's incredibly helpful what you're doing and helping everybody get property back that they may or may not have known that they were doing it about.
If you have a skill, you know you're good at it, use it, use it. And if you enjoy it, use it. Because a lot of people say, if you don't enjoy it, it's just a job. But if you do enjoy it, it's a career. And the really good part about doing this is that it's something that I love doing. I love helping people. I love educating the public on this subject. I love the smiles on my clients' faces when they get those checks at the end of the process. I genuinely want to help.
Customers.
So when it comes to this particular service, I would say make sure that you're properly licensed. One thing that actually helps in this space is having the proper credentials. Okay. If you know that you're good at something and you want to turn it into a business and it's credibility and public trust based, make sure you have those credentials to do it. And if you could find like a license or some sort of registration that's relevant to what you're doing, do that because it does lend credibility to the service that you're offering.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So what is the most challenging thing that you experienced while setting up your business and being an entrepreneur that you didn't think would be so challenging?
So when I first became a third party representative in my county, there were folks who tried to do what I do, who were price gouging, who I guess there are little classes out there for this, but they don't teach them how to get licensed, have E&O insurance, have, any credentials whatsoever. They're basically just lead generation, like couple hour classes for that course creator. So the counties that I had encountered before I was able to submit claims, they had closed ranks because their job is to hold these funds for safekeeping for the rightful owner. But they did not like the abuse of the process by third party representatives. So one of the biggest challenges I had was actually sitting down with government officials getting their perspective on it, getting stakeholders' perspective for months and months and months before I was actually able to submit my first claim and getting them to allow qualified third parties to submit claims in that county. And so that was the biggest challenge for me was getting that public trust and assisting with forming the infrastructure to allow third parties to help residents in those counties.
So, what skills do you rely on now that were helped and informed and kind of like you built upon them that you learned while you were serving in the Army?
I'd say, first of all, be thorough with investigations. Okay. You never want to reach out to the wrong person and have them sign a contract for property that doesn't belong to them. Never just take somebody's word for it. Like always verify identity. Those interpersonal communication skills, a big part of what I do is client expectation management because some folks are like, oh, well, how come I haven't been paid out yet? Da, da. But we are dealing with government systems here. And having been in service, it's more of a hurry up and wait. So they might put that it's going to take 90 days to process it. But yeah, it takes 90 days to process it. But, it might take another 2 weeks for you to get the check because they're sending it snail mail. You know what I mean? So it's just a matter of managing expectations, those interpersonal communication skills, and then being really thorough with what you do. Because you cannot submit paperwork for large financial assets if you are not thorough in what you are doing. And know your boundaries. Know your boundaries because you can't just approach anybody about certain things. One thing about military is there is a chain of command, and it's the same with government entities. There is a chain of command. So if you have a problem, or you're not thorough, or there is anything going on, know that chain of command because you can actually lose your registration or your license if you violate those boundaries or chain of command.
And how forgiving are they if like you make a mistake or you violate that?
They're not necessarily very forgiving. They might deny it later on after you come seeking an explanation for why it's delayed. So they're not really in a hurry to tell you what's going on because it is our job as asset recovery professionals to know what we are doing. I don't think I'd do anything over again. because wouldn't be the patient person that I am today if I hadn't gone through the things I had gone through. If I hadn't been in the service, I don't think I would have had that investigative background. If I didn't go through tough times in a relationship and work my way out of it, I don't think that I would have the resilience that I have today. I wouldn't change a thing.
As we kind of wrap things up, is there anything that we didn't talk about, or is there any question that I didn't ask you that you were like, you know what? I really wish you asked me this question.
Well, there are a couple things that I'm working on right now, and I love the fact that I actually became a policy advocate for the statute that actually governs my entire work. That is HB 2234 in Missouri, and I saw a flaw in the system, and I wrote a bill, and a state representative jumped on it. And so now it is active legislation in our House of Representatives, being an advocate to improve the system for the average person and the average homeowner or average property owner is something I'm extremely proud of.
That's really cool. Like you wrote a bill and now it's, going to be considered. So what was that process like and what is the bill about?
So the bill is about like I know I told you about tax foreclosure surplus, where people can lose their homes over a couple $1,000s. And if they don't claim those funds in a certain amount of time, which is 3 years from the date of sale, but they don't even have the first year and a half to claim those funds. So basically, it puts them at a disadvantage because the notice doesn't state they're entitled to the funds. And then if they don't claim it, they lose the right to claim the proceeds from the sale of their own home. So the county not only takes the house they paid off over a couple $1,000s, but they will take the proceeds from it and keep the proceeds after not even notifying you properly that the proceeds exist. So that bill is meant to update the reporting standards and notification standards to those homeowners who have lost the house, but also instead of them getting to keep the funds, they actually will it would mandate these counties to turn those funds over to the unclaimed property division until the actual owner comes forward to claim it. That way, people don't lose their house and the proceeds from the sale of that house. Because the way it is right now, the current statute is wildly unfair. So if I have a goal and I've got something I want to do, I will walk into a room like I own it. I had no idea about I have politics or being around politicians or anything like that. But, when I went to certain events, I was just like, hey, I belong here. That's pretty much it. Just have confidence. And confidence is I do believe confidence is key. If you got something you're really passionate about, don't give up.
Absolutely. So how did you get into the right rooms? Like a lot of people out there might be thinking, well, I'm passionate about something and I want to, get into politics or something. And you never thought you'd get into politics. You just became passionate about something and wanted to make a change. So for those passionate people out there who don't know where to start, where's a good place to start?
So for me in general, I decided to have my business sponsor certain events. And when you become a sponsor, you end up getting preferred seating, which
Okay.
puts you in the right spot at the right time. And then I also had a couple of friends who had some connections. So drawing on those connections too as well. That actually really helped. But having it together is another thing. One thing I've been told by a lot of folks, a lot of successful people, if you can't explain what you do in 30 seconds or 30 or 60 seconds, you're going to lose your audience. You're going to lose the person you're talking to. So be able to actually explain what you do in a very quick manner. Because some people are like, you know what, I gotta go. and but leave them thinking about it. Be able to explain it to the point where it leaves them thinking about it. And then being really receptive to it. And I can't diminish the assistance of the friends that helped me do that either, especially when it came to one-on-one meetings with those individuals, especially with the representative that took the bill on herself. It was a really good friend of mine who got me that lunch date.
Were you intentional about it or was it kind of like it just kind of happened?
It was very intentional. I would ask questions. I have a few friends that are consultants, those that are also business owners. I would go to business conferences. The VA actually has really good resources for veteran business owners. And they have the DAV Patriot Boot Camp, stuff like that. And getting advice on how to do those things, how to properly network, how to properly gain support for your business, and how to talk to people, how to structure your presentations, and so on and so forth. It's pretty cool.
No, that's amazing. So Tamara, I really appreciate you stopping by and being on the show. And if there's anything else that I could do for you, just please let me know.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely.